Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and a video show which brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, and experience from hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Frits Bussemaker, and today I'm pleased to have a conversation with Alberto Di Meglio. Alberto, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Fritz. Very nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Alberto, you have a short but very significant bio. You are currently the digital strategy lead at CERN, and you've been with CERN almost your whole professional life since January 1989, if I believe.
98.
88. And you educated both in Italy and in England. In Italy, you have a cum laude 100 out of 100. Congratulations, well done.
Thank you.
So I'm curious. We've heard about CERN a lot, and we're going to talk about CERN. The first question I just had to ask that because when I looked at your background, you mentioned a perfect score in Italy. I'm just wondering, is that score needed to get into CERN?
So, yes, in a way it is. I mean, CERN is a very competitive environment. Some people might call it a bit, elite from a scientific knowledge and scientific generation point of view. So academic qualifications are certainly one of the criteria used to recruit people. So, having a perfect score, maybe, even a PhD on top of a degree or a master, it's quite useful, yes.
Yeah. So CERN, for those people who don't know, you're going to tell us hopefully a lot about CERN, but it's based in Geneva, Switzerland. How did you get into CERN?
So it's an interesting story because you mentioned I have a master degree in Italy in aerospace engineering. So my initial professional direction was actually not relevant for CERN at all. So how I got to CERN is an interesting story. So I got my master degree in Italy first, and then in Italy at the time it was still there was a mandatory military service period of time. So after my degree, I spent a bit more of 1 year in the Italian Navy, doing some activities related to maritime activities, which is not space like my original, but there are some similarities of how things happen in atmospheric conditions or upper atmospheric condition or outer or just beyond the atmosphere, and what happens underwater. Completely different environment in terms of viscosity and materials, but techniques are the same. So I spent some time in there, and then because of my experience in the Navy, I was contacted to be part of a European Commission funded project in the UK, Birmingham University, to work on simulation of underwater acoustics, telecommunication systems. So that was the purpose. Now, I spent 4 years in the UK working on this after the military service. And then after that, I was looking for something interesting to do. And one of my colleagues at Birmingham had just applied to CERN. So I said, why not? let's try the same. So I applied. And actually, a lot of the techniques I was researching on for simulation, acoustic fields, etc., were relevant for some aspects of simulation of particle physics activities. So I applied, especially for computing, and I got a position at CERN. So it's a voyage across 3 or 4 different disciplines that, starting from space, led me to the subatomic level of research.
Yeah, I got that. Now, you're not currently the digital strategy lead at CERN. Does that involve direct work on the core business of CERN, or more supporting the infrastructure to allow research to do their research?
So it's a bit of both. So this is the CERN has, for the first time in its more than 70 years history, a chief information officer and a CIO office. So this is not typical. So it's typical outside in many organizations, but
Yeah.
CERN never had that. And computing, it is considered one of the main pillars of CERN with research and education. But usually there was never a specific focus on computing research. This is not in the CERN mission. Now, today, with everything that is happening in the digital technology space and ecosystem, artificial intelligence, high-performance computing, quantum computing, a bit more attention on digital activities and development is more and more important. So an office was created, and I've been appointed as a digital strategy lead within the CIO office. The CIO office also has activities of data governance, data privacy, cybersecurity, vendor management in terms of technology, etc. But I'm responsible for the digital activities. So it is certainly a core pillar. It's not physics fundamental research, but the boundaries between what is computing and what is physics is blurring. And there are more and more discussion about computing for physics, but also physics for computing. So, for example, AI, physics-driven AI modeling, this is today is becoming very, very important. So, it's an interesting multidisciplinary conversation between physics, computing, and other types of research.
Okay, so that bears me the question. Now focusing on CERN, what is the core objective of CERN? What do you try to achieve?
Yeah, so CERN, first of all, CERN is an international laboratory. So the core mission of CERN since the beginning is to provide the instruments, so all the device and technologies and infrastructure that an international community of physicists, of researchers can use to do their research around nuclear physics and particle physics and understanding how the universe essentially was generated in the first place. So CERN today designs and operates the Large Hadron Collider, is the largest particle collider in the world.
Yeah, could you maybe give a little bit more explanation of its dimensions, so people who are not familiar with that, what that is?
Sure. So today, as I mentioned, the Large Hadron Collider is the largest in the world. Large, for the LHC, the acronym, stands for Large Hadron Collider. So large it is because it's very large. It's 27 kilometers of circumference, is an average of 100 meters underground across the border between France and Switzerland. And Hadron Collider, it is because, of course, collider, because particles collide, and hadron because it is designed for heavy particles, so protons and ions. And the goal is really to take these particles and accelerate them to a speed which is very close to the speed of light inside the ring of the collider, and then make them collide. And once the particles collide, they produce other particles. They produce a lot of effects. And researchers look at these effects and these other particles, and based on the current knowledge of physics, they try to understand what happened in the first place in the collision, trying to recreate the conditions at the very beginning of the origin of the universe, just fractions, tiny fraction of seconds after the Big Bang, to understand why the universe came into place. Today, there is something called the standard model of physics that describe, sort of taxonomy of different types of particles and forces and interactions, which is very well understood, but still it explains about 5% of what the universe is made of, 5%. So there is a 95% of something else that we today, humanity, doesn't really know very well. And this is partly what is called the dark matter, partly what is called dark energy. There are many open questions about matter and antimatter, for example. Why, we see matter in the universe. We don't see naturally antimatter. We can create antimatter in the laboratory, but we don't see it. Now, the laws of physics are, for the vast majority, in most cases, are symmetric. So Why, if the same amount of matter and same amount of antimatter had been created at the origin of the universe, they would have immediately annihilated back together, and there would be no universe today. So there has been some kind of unbalance, some lack of symmetry in the origin that gave rise to the universe as we know it today. All these mechanisms are not very well understood today. And what is dark matter? We know there is an amount of mass in the universe that is enough to keep the galaxies together, etc. But the standard model doesn't justify all the mass that we see. So there are many more things that we need to investigate, to discover. There are so many open questions. And these accelerators, these devices, provide the tools, the instruments for the community to try and give an answer to those questions. This is the core mission.
Yeah. Okay. Basically, also what I'm hearing you say, if I understand correctly, is the universe, the world we live in, only exists because it's not perfect.
Absolutely. Yes. Perfection. I mean, we are lucky that perfection doesn't exist. It would be very, very boring.
Yeah.
So there are so many strange things, so many strange effects, ruptures of symmetry that create the nature and the universe as we know it today. So very important.
A couple of questions related to that. First of all, maybe a very pragmatic business question, but what justifies the large investment both in energy, time, and funding in the CERN?
Yeah. So this is a question that, as you can imagine, this is not the first time we get that question. So, of course, there is a value in scientific knowledge per se. So trying to understand why things exist the way they exist, or where we come from, where we are going. Those questions have a value per se. Now, trying in the process of answering those questions provides opportunities for creation of many different types of value: business value, economic values, technical values, or societal value. Sometimes I made the comparison between what we do today with the race to the moon in the last century, now in the 60s. Of course, going to the moon was important just per se, but there were motivations behind that were of many different types, and doing that generated a lot of technology that we use today. So CERN is exactly the same. We try to understand how the universe came into place, but by doing that, we develop medical accelerators. We develop a new type of materials. We develop the digital touch screens that you use today on your mobile phone come from original technology, certain technologies. So there are so many things that happen that produce return on investment for the member states and for all the contributors to the experiment, to why we do fundamental research.
Okay. Thank you for that. Now, what would you consider to be, let's say, the milestones, first of all, in your career, and to what extent are those milestones aligned with CERN?
So for me, so I've been very lucky. I've done really many different things. CERN is a place where even if you stay for 30 years, so you don't do the same things for too long. So I mentioned I started as an aerospace engineer, and at the beginning I was working a bit on my original interest was a simulation of space-borne infrastructures. And then I moved to simulation of underwater infrastructures, devices. Then at CERN, initially at CERN, I started as a system engineer. It was purely computing infrastructure. So it was a time of transition between the different mainframe systems to more commodity computing. And my original role was to take part in the design of this transition. But then that was the time between the end of the previous accelerator, the LEP, and the start of the new accelerator, the Large Hadron Collider. So there is a big difference. There was a big difference between the LEP and the LHC in terms of the amount of data that the community was expecting to be generated from the experiments using the accelerator. And it was clear since the beginning that it was not going to be possible anymore to simply have a computer next door or under your desk to analyze this data. So the community started looking at how to design an international, heavily distributed infrastructure. And this was what CERN with the community started doing at the beginning of the, between the end of the last century and the beginning of this century, between 2002, 2003, up to 2010, to design the international distributed computing infrastructure that we called the grid.
Yeah.
And the grid, from a technology point of view, is a precursor of the cloud. So what is called cloud computing today, which we are all familiar with, actually started with these discussions of how to massively distribute and analyze scientific data. The business model was different, but technology, the community designed the very first massive internationally distributed computing infrastructure. So that was one of the initial milestones. And my experience with distributed computing systems for underwater applications, but the same kind of techniques were very important, very instrumental for me to take part in that endeavor. And I was particularly responsible for coordinating the project that designed most of the software that was used across the infrastructure. So the term is not used today very much, but at the time you had the hardware infrastructure, you had the applications, and in between you had something called the middleware.
Yeah.
All the the tools and services that bridge hardware infrastructure with the application and data management, computing management, etc. So that was a very intense time. It was projects funded by the member state of CERN, by the community, by the European Commission, to design this infrastructure. And that changed the world. It changed the world scientifically speaking, but the societal impact, the economic impact that came out of the work done 30 years ago has changed the world.
Yeah. It almost makes me think that I'm now, so my thought is, hey, I'm talking to one of the fathers of cloud technology.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't go that far. I mean, I'm one of the brothers of all the people
Okay. Yeah.
that did that. I gave my contribution, certainly, especially in the European ecosystem, to structure that.
Good. Okay. No, accept that. But what I'm also hearing is, because when I look at the internet and the browser, tell me a little bit about CERN and CERN milestones. I come across two, notably the Higgs boson discovery and the invention of the World Wide Web, which, I mean, those are, I'd say, worldwide phenomenon, especially the World Wide Web, and we'll talk about Higgs boson a little bit later. But you just mentioned also two other very significant contributions, which I could not find in my preparation. The whole cloud concept and the touchscreen. Almost seems like CERN has the same, I would say, issues with marketing itself as a lot of other, I would say, scientists, IT people around the world.
That is certainly true. Yeah. I mean, of course. So the World Wide Web, was invented at CERN again for a very practical reason. All the inventions coming from CERN are done for practical reasons. We have a problem to solve, and we solve it. So the World Wide Web was done in this way to share information across the community in the late 80s. Then the grid came along 10 years later to solve again the problem of massively distributed data, the different dimension. There is this technology process of inventions that happen continuously. The touch screen were invented to ease maintenance of underground or technical installations. So if you have gloves or other constraints, that is more practical. But there is indeed a lot more. We were at least a bit shy in promoting this. Okay, the focus is on science. If something happens as a side effect, then we give it back to the world. But we used not to follow it very much. Today, this is not the case for many reasons. We are much more mature and careful in managing in the innovation process and the return on investment and the collaboration. We tend to talk about knowledge transfer, for example, rather than technology transfer, because of course there is technology, but we want to transfer, and not even transfer. We talk about knowledge sharing, because this is a bidirectional process of interacting with other scientific communities, etc. But yeah, I mean, today also with the new CIO office, we have a much more careful approach to managing this technology return on investment, for sure.
Yeah. Now, I think everybody around the world can assess how significant the World Wide Web is. How significant was Higgs boson?
For the community, of course, it was a major milestone. Was the last missing piece within this model, this standard model of physics that I mentioned. And so the Higgs boson was the missing piece, was found. So the model is complete. There are a number of things, smaller parts that to be clarified, but the model is complete. But the true importance behind the Higgs boson is that it's a particular type of particle, or it's a boson, and is actually the element, the component that gives mass to every other particle. So without the Higgs boson, all the other particles in the model could not have mass, so the universe would not exist.
Okay. Now, you were at CERN in 2012 and it was discovered. Can you take us back? How does that look like? I mean, on one hand, I'm comparing this to, you could say, you mentioned, compared it to landing on the moon. So is this everybody coming together in the hall and say, hey, look, we're seeing the discovery real time? I cannot mention the meaning that dramatic, but how does one know, okay, it's been discovered?
Yeah.
How did it look
it's not
like?
real time. So this is, so you consider the experiments that use the Large Hadron Collider. Imagine them as a sort of gigantic microscopes looking down at the subatomic level. Okay? So it is not possible to see exactly what happens at the moment of collision. That's why we have this immense data processing system to understand what happened. And what you do is not just one observation. You need to build a probability distribution of what happens. And this takes millions and millions and millions of repetitions of collisions. But over time, you build this probability distribution, and you can say, yeah, that looks like what the theory says the Higgs boson should look like. And when you get to a certain level of precision, you can say, yeah, I mean, we have found it. And actually, this is what happens. The announcement was done in this way. So the two main experiments, Atlas and CMS, had independently discovered, the different, the presence of the boson.
But am I correct in that you're saying, look, this is the statistically the most, you could say, the best answer. So statistically, it still could be that the experiment shows something else.
So yes, that's why it's not sufficient to see it a few times. You need to build something. In the probability distribution curve, you have the peak of the
I understand that. So at a certain point, okay, I've done it so many times, it comes back to the same answer. So it has to be that.
Yeah, I mean, you narrow
on statistics and not an absolute.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because this, I mean, when you get beyond a certain level of precision, it's called 5 sigma precision, then it is statistically, I mean, it's a bit contradictory, but it's statistically a certainty. Okay.
Okay.
So, of course, but because that doesn't mean that it is not that there is a probability that it's not that. It is that sometimes something else can happen. But if you build this distribution, this matches exactly what the Higgs boson in this case looks like when you observe it. Okay, so that matches perfectly. There is no doubt that it is like that. But it means that sometimes the same process might produce something different in a very, very, small
Yeah.
amount of times.
Okay.
And actually, this is what we see. If it actually, I reverse your comment. If we had found something 100% of the times, that would be wrong.
Okay.
Nature doesn't work like that. So the probability distribution we found matches exactly what we were expecting to find.
I'll have that. Let that think in. Hey, a couple of questions. What drives you? What motivates you to spend all those years working for CERN?
So it is a bit, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, is the variety of things. So there is never a moment of being bored. I don't know what to do. There are
Yeah.
so many people to interact with at all levels. Researchers from the worldwide community, activities. There is physics, there is computing, material science, electronics. And I'm lucky that my career through CERN brought me to touch a bit of everything, or those always in the digital space, but I've interacted with so many activities, so many people. It's fascinating. And I like very much this aspect of discovering things from a fundamental science point of view, but producing impact on
Okay.
society, on people. It's a fantastic combination of activities.
So then I have to ask you, were you bored all those years ago when because I saw that you set up your own company, Soft Plumbers, for a couple of
Yes.
years. Was that like a mistake you made, or what was the reason you went? Because you were at CERN, you started a company, and you came back.
Yes. So no, I not a mistake, not a mistake. I think it's part of the process. So when, after I spent 4 years doing research in Birmingham in UK. Then I came 3 years for CERN working as a system architect. And at some point, I realized something was missing in my general background. Okay, it was very academic, very scientific, very technical, but I didn't have the feeling of how to measure impact on of the business
Yeah.
side of things. So I decided there was a combination of two things. I wanted to have that experience and consider that that was the period of the golden period of startup.
Yeah.
Everybody
Hmm.
was becoming rich doing
Yeah.
startups. So I took the opportunity. There were, I had ideas to develop some technology that could be used for monitoring
Okay.
distributed networks. And I took the opportunity to see whether this could be transformed into, commercial activity. So that lasted 3 years. So I left CERN. At the time, was quite rare. Leaving
Yeah.
CERN with an ongoing contract was. Well, today there are many opportunities, and that is not so rare anymore. But at the time, was not
Okay. So
typical.
after that period, did you go back? Did they ask you to come back? I mean, have you been in contact all that time?
Mm, So I kept following the activities of CERN. It was at the moment of building, the initial
Yeah.
design of the grid. So it's again, it's a progression because the 3 years that I spent creating and managing my startup gave me this, business and more industrial knowledge that I
Yeah.
was
Okay.
missing. Was a,
Uh,
an, yes,
so no, go ahead because
no,
I
so it
have a
was a
follow-up question. Huh?
very interesting experience. It was but was also very stressful.
Okay.
Was incredibly,
So if you look back, w- um, it'll on one hand, okay, you've gained that experience you were lacking in
yeah.
your you say I don't have that. But to what extent have you also then realized that okay, I know what I left behind, I want to go
Yes.
back to that.
Exactly, exactly. So that is the fundamental question. So after 3 years, I I could say now I have the experience, but I was really missing the way CERN works, the international dimension, the scientific aspects. So I found an opportunity to go back, and I can say again, as I mentioned, was managing a startup was very stressful, but I came back to CERN with I was a different person. And that's why, my activities after coming back were not the same as the original ones. I started doing project management and coordination, which I could not do 3 years earlier. So again, as part of a process, I don't think it was a mistake, but I was missing the international scientific aspects of CERN for sure.
Okay, got that. So after all those years for CERN, is this also where you're going to end your career?
I, I never, someone said that it's easy to predict, what is this? It's easy to predict the future if it has already happened, or something like this. So I cannot say what is going to happen in the next 5 to 6 years. But at the moment, what I'm doing is so exciting, so interesting that I certainly don't see the need to do change.
I would have expected an immediate yes, of course, because even after all those years, you talk so passionately about what an organization like CERN offers. And I can fully understand that if you work in an environment with so many high-level, smart people, it has to be inspiring. I cannot imagine otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So that's why also, I mean, what I'm doing at the moment is extremely exciting, not only from a technology point of view, but also, as I said, this is the first time CERN as a CIO office, as a digital technology, a digital strategy lead. So we are building something new, which is extremely interesting, extremely exciting. But, there are so many opportunities, when in 3 or 4 years, let's say, this becomes a bit the norm. Again, we have a running office, etc. I can do something else within CERN, and I can train. I mean, I'm getting closer to my retirement, which means I will do something else. But my part of my duty is also to train the next generation. So I will start thinking about my succession plan and who comes after me.
Okay, 2 final questions then, Alberto. First of all, what do you see as your own legacy? What are you leaving behind at CERN?
So I hope I leave this multidisciplinary perspective on science. Okay, I've been a scientist for some time. I'm not a scientist today. I'm more a manager of science, and I think it is necessary in this type of endeavors that span many decades of work, many different types of people, many cultures, many activities, to have this multidisciplinary view on science and technology, on the business aspects, on interaction, etc. So I think I've built this figure for within CERN. Maybe it exists elsewhere, but I built this type of multidisciplinary profile that is not so common, and I would like this to become more common in the management of this type of scientific activity. So this is, I hope, the legacy I can leave.
Okay, and then finally, thank you for that answer, by the way. You said, okay, you're looking for the next generation. What's in your view, the single most valuable advice or lesson you want to pass on to the next generation?
So it is if you want, related to this. So it is always necessary to keep an open mind. Things in science, in technology, in society change so rapidly, so dramatically sometimes, that if we think we know everything, that the way we work is the way everybody should work, we are lost. Okay, so always, you can become specialized in something, but you need to know a bit of everything else. And you need to be ready to challenge your own assumptions, to put yourself in question. Am I taking the right decision? Is this the right direction? Can we try something else? And listen to people. I've run through situations where there was a difficulty, so people don't listen to each other. Okay, so listening to each other, it's always necessary. Maybe you don't agree, that's fine. But listening, trying to understand, and then you take your own decisions. But if you don't listen, the decision you take will always be wrong.
Great.
There is always something missing.
Yeah. Alberto, that's such a great way to end this conversation, because it's been a pleasure to listen to you talk about your career at CERN. And I really want to thank you for sharing that with the brand called You. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you for this.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.